What do you think that they're so surprised about? Like, you're with a church? Like, what's the deal?
Because the church has been silent. The church has been silent, sadly. For years, it's like other individuals have taken the charge where the church should have been.
It's not a reach to say that protesting should be part of what it means to be a Protestant. And yet, if you're like me, the idea of getting out and getting involved with a protest made you uncomfortable. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? What does it mean? What if I don't have all the right answers? What's the point of it all? And what about the whole separation of church and state? And should our church even get involved? We're going to pick up this conversation again with my friend Garth and talk about why he believes that the church should be involved with protest, or at least minimally, why he gets involved with protest.
Just the whole idea of protesting in general.
Because that's not something that we do well as Adventists, even though we're Protestants.
Yeah, I know. But it's phenomenal to see individuals, some who identify themselves as allies, and they're very bold with that. I'm an ally, and I'm thinking, what is happening here? I can't explain it myself. All I know is that there is a movement, and I just wished that our church maintained that same philosophy of being a movement. I think that was lost somewhere along the line. That's what Juneteenth was really about. I think it has morphed into not just a celebration of freedom for Black people, but in general, what we're seeing is that everyone, I saw a sign downtown on one of our protests, seeks for justice. Like the Sikh, Amish came down there. I mean, Muslims were at the forefront. And I'm like, Lord, like, where are we? Where are we? Like, seriously, we were the one leading the charge at one time. We are the movement. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is a movement, and it's supposed to be. And I believe that we should be leading the charge in terms of Juneteenth and advocating for freedoms. And if someone is oppressed, we should be the first one on the forefront. And that's what Juneteenth was about. So it's more than just, this is, just Black folks going out there and chanting for justice and calling out freedoms on Juneteenth. No, this is for the entire world. Our message is not just for Black people or for white people. It's for the world. And something remarkable has been happening and happened on that same march, which I think we need to really take note of. When we take a stand, God will send people to us. There are multiple individuals on various marches that we have done who have come and said, "What church are you from? And you guys are out here? How can I be part of it?"
Wow.
I have numbers in my phones of people who came out and said, "I want to be involved in this church."
As you're imitating their response, there's this surprise. What do you think that they're so surprised about? Like, you're with a church? Like, what's the deal?
Because the church has been silent. The church has been silent, sadly. For years, it's like other individuals have taken the charge where the church should have been. They've been vocal, they've been active. I think that's the difference now in being able to march and being able to take that stand and being able to be present for Juneteenth and whatever else is happening. That it shows that we are a movement and we are supportive and we're not going to be silent. That's the change that I think we really need to see right now.
On this most recent Juneteenth, there were several faith leaders in our community, including Garth, who organized a special march. It was done to celebrate and to stand in solidarity with our Black brothers and sisters.
For this march, we wanted it to be a celebration, but we also were mindful that many of the individuals, some were very scared. This is the very first time that they're coming out to something like this. Some were like, are we going to get gassed? Or, what will happen? Will the police actually be present? So a lot of care was into the background planning of this march for Juneteenth, for the celebration. Everyone is not called to be on the streets. And understand, there are roles that I play. I am a leader in the church, yes. And there is a role for that. Like, I have to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. So I'm sitting on different committees. In fact, I'm on like 24 or more different organizations outside of my role as a pastor.
Wow.
Just because there needs to be a voice. And so I'm there. I'm present. Community organizations, police organizations, I'm there. But I think that's the responsibility that we must all share. That is not just about being in the streets. That's one thing, to show up and be there. There is a place for every single person to actually take up the charge. And everyone has a place, a voice that they can use, whether it's with pen and paper, if they're older, whether it's like typing an email, text message, something. But right now, there are very smart, educated individuals who can tap into certain resources and be able to contact people who are in powerful places of influence. Why not utilize that giftedness and be able to make that change policies, advocate for individuals, and if you feel called to a certain type of ministry, do it. Like, there are certain things that we can do, which sometimes other individuals can't. Like, after COVID, of course, go ahead and visit a prison, visit a youth prison where they don't see anyone, where they don't have any friends. If you feel inclined to do that, like, go out in there and help feed somebody, join a local community services type of group and go out there and do a part to help a family that's in need. But everyone can do something.
The march was an absolutely beautiful display of camaraderie, of community coming together to unite around our Black brothers and sisters to take a stand against injustice. After the march, life continued for most of us, and life was maybe even good for most of us. And for Garth, it's been interesting because he feels like there's two separate lives that he's living, two different experiences, one of discrimination and oppression, and the other of hope and optimism.
I have to grapple with the fact that, okay, I'm fighting for justice on one end. I'm here sitting in meetings with government officials trying to change policies. And then I come back to an organization that inherently sometimes can advocate for white supremacy.
It's a really weird place to be.
That is what I'm grappling with.
It's kind of like the clean your room before you go try and change the world kind of an idea, right?
Yeah. There are structures that are set up that is very discriminatory. And I have to grapple with the fact that I've come back to a church after, advocating, and I'm tired on the streets, to now sit in some Zoom meetings to discuss whether or not racism exists.
It's weird.
It's strange. And having conversations up till today, just having more conversations. Does racism really exist? These are questions that leaders in the church are asking me. We've had individuals who said, hey, you got to remember our base. I'm like, what does that mean? Remember who funds this thing. And I'm like, what? Like, is that supposed to be a threat on me? Because last time I checked, you didn't call me to ministry, so I really don't care. Like,
it's people from outside this context.
No, I'm talking about people from within the Adventist circles who just reminding me of who funds the Adventist church. And I'm like, so are we saying then that we are funded by white supremacists? What is the context? What are you really saying? And so I'm like, at this rate, it doesn't matter to me. I'm still going to call out evil for evil. That's what it is. If it's evil, I'm going to call it out. If it's sin, I'm going to call it out. And I will continue to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves and speak for those who are voiceless. Because if we don't show up, then we're silent. And I refuse to be silent. I refuse to allow them to win. Because I think for a long time, I know for a long time in this country, racism has gone unchecked. And to allow for individuals to stand and their voices to be louder than those who have been marginalized and abused for years, then they win. So unless we are able to take a stand unless we are able to join with those who are in the streets. Because the truth is, many of those in the church are afraid to march. So who else are we going to march with? We have to join with those who are going to lift their voices.
Black leaders, lay people, and allies in the church are no longer going to remain on the sidelines. We're no longer willing to be silent. And as diverse as our church is, the interesting thing is that our leadership hasn't always been diverse. In fact, if you just look throughout the history books, all of our General Conference presidents have been white, despite not having an overwhelming majority of white members in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so some might feel that it's a bit hypocritical to promote diversity while actually not living it out systemically.
Right now, one of the things that we're advocating for is for representation all across the board for various groups within diverse groups within various conferences. If we have a Vietnamese population, shouldn't there be Vietnamese representation? We can't continue to have a leadership that is so male and white dominated, that excludes so many other cultures in a diverse church. That's one thing. And it's really sad. When you look through the entire leadership of the church, we can easily say it is male, it is white, and it has always been. In a diverse church with a diverse call for people around the world to join in this church that is connected to God. We're for all nations, people, kindred, tongue, and yet it's still dominated by one race. I think that is a shame on the church, and that needs to change. So in a vision for the future, it's really diversity, to have representation from those who are Black, from those who are white, from those who are Latinx, from the Latinx community, Hispanic community, to be represented, and all other nations around the world. That we should be able to be truly a witness to the world. When they look at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they can say, wow, not only are they diverse, in the most diverse church in the world, but their leadership is also the most diverse in the world. We really can't say that currently, and that's a shame.
There is so much work to be done, a lot of change that could really benefit our church. And with all of those options, sometimes it's really hard to know where to start. But I'd like to think that one easy way to get involved is simply to help with representation. What does it look like to make room for others, to let other voices be heard and expressed?
As a Black man in the church, there's been some very positives. There have also been some very crushing times. For myself, my family, I just pray that more representation would be there, also of our youth, because they're asking this question. When we were out on the streets, it was all youth, and I'm like, I'm an old head here. Like the rest of them, they have it, and they're chanting. I felt honored to be there. It's sad though, because we have lost a lot of our youth because they have looked at the church and said, where are the leaders who represent us, who would stand for us? What got me this week? There was a young person that came to the church a few months ago. I preached on baptism, and that young lady turned to her mom and said, I'm not getting baptized. Well, this week, they, I guess, saw some of the videos about protesting. She went to her mom who was not a believer, didn't even believe in church. Believed she was a spiritual person, she said, but not believing in church, and went to her mom and said, I want to be in that church.
Wow.
I want to be baptized in that church. So right now, we have started the process towards baptism. And I don't know how that's going to look, where it's going to happen, if it's a river or what. But it brought joy to me, because not only are we having people who are following us down the street as we're marching. I mean, literally thousands of people followed us in various protests that we've done, wanting to know, wanting to connect wanting friendship, wanting relationships with us. But then we have individuals who are young and who are saying, look, now that I know that you're about something, that you're actually going to do what the Word of God said, church, that to me has touched my heart. Above all, if we can continue to show the gospel like this, I will die doing it.
Sounds like a good way to go.
Indeed, because it's making a difference. It's making a change in so many people's lives. And you know what? I believe that is the best witness ever. And I will continue to take that stand.
We have a long way to go, but think about it. How amazing would it be if our church actually was able to make these changes and to show the world what was possible? How cool would it be if our church truly was the light that Jesus called us to be, especially when it comes to the ideas of representation and racial reconciliation? We understand that the world isn't going to get better overnight, but even then, it doesn't mean that we have to make excuses and just kind of stand in the face of evil and just be complicit. No, I think because we love the church, we hold the church accountable. Because we can do better, we advocate for better, and we do better. This is our church, and let's stand for what's right.